Worldly loss. Also, it is narrated that one day a man came to Maulana and complained bitterly about his worldly losses and how poverty dogged his footsteps. Maulana counselled him to shun his company and added, "Do not come near us, and keep away from us and the people like us, so that worldly fortune might come near you," and recited, "Come and be like me, O thou noble one, and seek neither the heights nor the depths of perishable things. For if the devil's texture were made in that way, then he would have been bedecked with a kingly crown and draped in the sage's garb." It is likewise narrated that once the Prophet Muhammad said to one of those who were present, "Wear iron gloves and welcome adversities and be prepared to undergo hardships, because the frown of worldly fortune is as a gift to those who love their Lord." Maulana related that once a mystic asked a wealthy man which did he love more, sin or money. The man replied that he loved money more. The mystic said, "You do not tell the truth, for you will leave your riches behind and will take your deeds with you." "Do something," continued the mystic, "that you take that which you love most, money, with you, that is, by spending in good causes and in charity, and so that you might send your riches to God before your arrival before God. For it is in the Quran, 'And whatever of good you send on beforehand for yourselves, you will find it with God. That is the best and greatest reward.'" The place of honor. It is further narrated that one day many close friends and men of piety and learning were invited by the saintly Mu'inuddin to his residence, and had already sat themselves at the places of honor as befitted their status in learning. But the High Governor wished that Maulana should also grace the occasion. Mujahid-din, the son-in-law of the governor, was sent to fetch Maulana. Meantime, among the gathering of distinction appeared a sense of embarrassment about where the Maulana would sit, since every seat of honor was taken. Everyone, content with his own sense of dignity, resolved that when Maulana arrived, he would just sit in whatever place was available. None of them was going to offer his seat of honor, all being important persons themselves. The one who was sent to fetch Maulana used fitting words of invitation. Maulana, taking the saintly Chalibi Hisamuddin and other friends, started towards the house. The followers of Maulana walked ahead. As soon as the saintly Hisamuddin stepped into the house, all the great sages made places of honor available for him. Later, Maulana arrived and the governor hurried to receive him and kissed his hand as a token of respect. Seeing that all the great dignitaries were already in occupation of seats of honor, he merely saluted them and sat down in the space beyond the chief platform. The saintly Chalabi Hisamuddin, seeing Maulana sitting in the space beyond, left his place and sat beside Maulana. Noting that other men of importance too came to where Maulana was sitting, but those who grudged to acknowledge the greatness of Maulana continued to sit in their high places, such as Sheikh Nasiruddin and Sayyid Sharifuddin and men like him. Each in his turn was learned in his own right, as if he had studied a whole library of books. They say that Sharifuddin was a man of high qualities and of knowledge, and yet somewhat outspoken and a little forward in speech. Therefore, seeing that Maulana had attracted most to his side from the row of honor, where seats were now empty, he asked where was the place of the chief guest, and who really was to be considered president of the gathering. Sheikh Sharifuddin voiced the opinion that according to the saints of Khorasan and those who have the cloistered life, the place of honor was the angle of the platform. But Sheikh Sadruddin said that the most honorable place was at the far end of the dais in the realm of the Sufis, and then as a test they asked Maulana to state the place of honor. The Maulana recited, "Is there any meaning in the terms or the habitation and who presides? Who are we and I? We are where the beloved is." "The president is where the beloved is," said Maulana, and Syed Sharifuddin asked, "Where is the beloved?" "O thou blind one, seest thou not?" said Maulana, and recited the verse, "You have no inward eyes to see, otherwise you would perceive in your whole being, from top to toe is no art but his." Later, when Maulana departed from this world, and Sharifuddin arrived at Damascus, he had lost his sight, a prediction of Maulana, and then he used to weep and cry. He said that when Maulana shouted at him, he felt that they held a large black tray before his eyes, with the consequence that he could neither determine the colour of things, nor see anything clearly. But he hoped that Maulana, whose sense of forgiveness was limitless, would forgive him for his arrogance, and recited the verse, saying, "Do not lose hope of forgiveness. The sea of remission is vast, if thou recant. For thy sins ask for forgiveness in prayer and meditation, for his forgiveness is beyond measure." It is also narrated that this incident took place at the house of Jalaluddin Karatai. Having had his seminary completed, he invited a large number of learned men and men of importance on the occasion of the opening ceremony of the college, the madrasa. On that day, Maulana Shamsi Tabriz had newly arrived in the town, and sitting on the platform amongst other men of learning, asked Maulana which was the seat of honour at a gathering. Maulana replied, "The seat of honour among men of learning is in the centre of the platform, and the place of honour of the men seeking the mysteries of mysticism is in the corner, and the place of honour of the Sufis at the end of the platform, and the place of honour of those who love is beside the loved one." And saying this, he left his place and sat beside Maulana Shams, and it is related that Maulana Shamsi Tabrizi became better known to the people of Konya after that. It is narrated, too, that once the governor Moinuddin had invited people to a mystical musical gathering in honour of Maulana. Many men of saintly pursuits and mystical thought were present. The atmosphere rose to great heights until midnight, with the consequence that all the food became cold and uneatable. The servant of the host whispered this in the ear of his master, who sought an opportunity to mention the fact to Maulana in a suitable manner. Maulana sensed the meaning, and observed, "How can a man standing beside a watermill stop the motion of the mill, when waters pour down with force uncontrollable?" The host wept in emotion on hearing this allegory. The food was distributed to the poor, and fresh food was prepared. Miracle of the Medicaments. It is also narrated that once the greatest of all contemporary physicians of Rome prepared medicine and pills to cure 70 persons that might be bitten by snakes. This was done in accordance with the commands of the then king, who likewise ordered that 70 cups of purgative drugs should also be got ready for eventualities. It so happened, however, that when these drugs were ready and prepared, Maulana visited the physician's residence. As was customary, Maulana was received with due honour by the noted physician, Akmaluddin by name. Maulana, noticing the 70-odd cups of medicine, drank one cup after another, and after each drastic draught, he, Maulana, thanked God for the excellence of the taste thereof. The medical man was so stunned that he could hardly speak, nor dared he inform Maulana about the energetic effect of that medicine upon a normal person. Having gulped down these potent drugs, Maulana walked away unconcernedly to his seminary, and the disciples were informed by the doctor about it. They, like him, were very anxious as to the result of the medicine upon the health of their master, a master who, in the nature of things, had to be very careful of his well-being, for he had undergone severe physical strain during his long life of prayer and exercises, and might not be able to stand up to a single dose. The physician could not rest contented. In great anxiety of mind, he betook himself to the place where Maulana lived. He found Maulana sitting in the archway, immersed in a book of inner philosophy, and serenely reading the text. After dutiful salutations, the physician delicately inquired how Maulana felt. He was told that Maulana was as cool and happy as if he were beside cooling rivers. The physician delicately suggested that it might be wise to desist from drinking cool water, whereupon Maulana ordered iced water to be brought. He put some ice in it further to chill it, and started sucking little bits of ice, and he drank that water to the full. Then he went to the bath, after which he commanded that mystical music should be played, and continued to listen to the chanting for 3 days without interruption. The physician clamoured that such a manifestation of disregard for medical potency was beyond all human experience, and this could only be done by saints. Thereupon he, with all his sons and family and those related to him, became disciples of Maulana, and he related the experience to his fellow physicians. The verse has it, "If he drinks poison, it becomes inert for him. But if the unripe seeker drinks it, he might, due to the venom, become as blue mice." It is this that made no effect upon the great first caliph, Abu Bakr, for to him poison worked as sugar. The allusion to the incident when the first caliph Abu Bakr, accompanying the Prophet Muhammad on his flight from Mecca to Medina, was hiding from their enemies in a cave, and a snake projected its head from a hole in the cave. And Abu Bakr put his big toe on the hole, and the snake struck, but the poison did not do him any harm. Miracle of the Blood. Likewise, it is narrated that during that time a great intellectual controversy arose amongst the physicians, whether man was linked by virtue of the blood in his veins, or through the mercy of God alone. The doctors of medicine naturally held the opinion that as blood was the life sap of a human body, if it was drained out, life would terminate. The thinkers of the esoteric type held a different view. They posed the question to Maulana. He said that in medicine, quite naturally, the existence of blood in the human body is essential. But in our way of thinking, man's existence is bound up with the will of God, and none can or should gainsay that. So saying, he called for a man to bloodlet him. He had himself bled to the extent that normal men would have expired, and so much blood was removed that the body showed a yellowish colour, being practically drained of all blood. He drew this to the attention of the physicians, and asked whether they did not believe that man lives through the mercy of God, and not by blood alone. They all bowed their heads in agreement and became his disciples. Then he went to his bath, and was thereafter joined in the chanting and singing of mystical verses, as if nothing unusual had occurred. Why sages speak of saints. It is also narrated that once Maulana Shamsuddin Multi visited the residence of Maulana and found him sitting alone. The master asked him to come and sit closer to him. Thereupon Multi sat closer. But Maulana asked him closer still, and yet closer, until Malti's knees touched those of the Maulana. And then the Maulana spoke about the great attainments of Sayyid Burhanuddin and Maulana Shamsi Tabrizi, until Malti became overwhelmed with it all. Thereupon Maulana, by way of explanation, said, "You so feel, because where anyone talks about the sublimity of pious people, there the benignity of God falls like a gracious rain and refreshes the mind." It is also narrated that whenever Maulana used to go to the bath, and his wife had given the disciples a silk mat, so that after a hot bath he might not get a chill. One day, when they were unfolding the silken quilt for the purpose, Maulana, seeing all this and noting the reason of it, at once shed the garments which were protecting him from the cold weather, and stepped out into the severe cold of the yard outside. The disciples saw that instead of wrapping himself up with warm clothing, he was standing on the snow-covered yard. He had placed a large piece of ice upon his head. By way of explanation, he said to his disciples, "O my friends, do not let my material self be pampered. I am not from the clan of the pharaohs, but of the tribe of that king who was the king of the great dervishes." Saying that, he put on his hat and walked away. The Unruly Self. Likewise, it is narrated that Hadrad Sultan Walad, the son of Maulana, said that when Maulana was as young as the age of 5 years, his desires and cravings had already died out. "My father attained his majority, and then his years reached middle age. He was constantly subjecting himself to the rigors of prayer. In a sense of self-abnegation, he disregarded all material comforts and suppressed his desires for worldly things. I asked him why, when his desires were suppressed at that early age, did he persist in renunciation, still as watchful as ever about physical wants and desires? He replied that the self is a great trickster, and one has always to be alert in case that evil overpowers one. Pull the bridle of the unruly self ever hard. Beware of the snares of the world's faithless flowers, believing not in his holy garb, or his long string of prayer beads, neither allying oneself with him, nor jointly riding hard with him. Admission of a disciple. It is also related that Chalibi Hisamuddin reported that Syed Sharifuddin had a great friend, a notable man in Konya, who had a son of grace and intelligence. The young man was greatly impressed by Maulana's piety and goodness, and desired to become a disciple, even at an early age. The youth's father, thinking that Maulana's teachings were too advanced for the lad, reserved his permission. But the young man threatened to commit suicide unless he was given permission to become a devotee of the great sage. The boy's father ultimately consented and approached Syed Sharifuddin about the matter. Sharifuddin, rather than give a negative reply to the father, laid a plan. He suggested that the father should ask Maulana whether his son would go to paradise or not. An insolent question might anger Maulana, and permission to enroll him as one of the disciples might be withheld. The father of the young man gave a great feast for the learned of the town. After this, as was usual, a mystical dance and musical concert was held. When the manifestations and performance were at their height, the father asked the suggested question. Without hesitation, Maulana replied that the young man was destined to go to paradise, and was fit to behold the grace of God. He was not like others of his age in the town, because he was attracted by spiritual teachings, and they were not. Thereupon the father of the young man, as well as the son, became disciples of Maulana. Poor quality of disciples. It is also narrated that one day Mu'inuddin, the celebrated, observed the Maulana was born of great piety, and like unto him none has been born for generations, but that his disciples were of poor quality and self-seekers. One of those present on the occasion reported the conversation to Maulana, and his disciples were greatly grieved. Maulana thereupon sent a note to the man who had made the observation, saying that if his disciples were already men of quality, he would have become their disciple, and not they his. Because they were lacking in virtue, he accepted them in order to refine them. He then said, I swear by the soul of my honoured father, that till God became the grace protector of those men so that such men might tread the right path of acceptance, they were not enrolled as my disciples. He recited, Strayed they are, lingering they were in the path of godly things. To their rescue we have come, to the aid of such we have to strive. When Mu'inuddin received the letter of Maulana, he was so moved by the argument that he immediately became his follower and served him faithfully ever after.